Boost your EBIT by 10% in just a few months? Sounds like another empty promise, doesn't it? Maybe we'll tell you it's magic. A sprinkle of fairy dust and poof, your profits soar. But here's the deal, no fairy dust, just proven results. We've slashed late billing by 80%, recovered millions in missed revenues and cut cash cycles by 5 days for some of the world's biggest forwarders. Real numbers, real impact, real fast. If you're ready to find out how we do it, visit www.ontegos.cloud.
You are listening to the Freight Buyers Club, a home for those interested in international trade, shipping, procurement, logistics, and air freight. In fact, all things supply chain in the Americas, Asia, and beyond.
Hello, today we're zooming in on one of the hottest questions in shipping and logistics. How shippers are responding to the latest US-China tariff truce, both right now, but also how they're planning in the long term. And we're doing this with the CEO of one of the world's leading forwarders.
For the ocean, it takes about from the place the order to make the product to deliver at least 4 to 6 weeks. Some product up to 8 weeks, unless the contract manufacturer or like a AI product, right, or like a semiconductor. I think they would be faster. But for traditional product like the ocean product, back to school, the backpack, the stationery, I think those it will take time to recover. But because the 90 days and from the 125% down to 30%, I think that's what people are aiming for that.
Welcome to the Freight Buyers Club Insight podcast, which, as you heard there, is brought to you by Ontegos Cloud. I'm your host, Mike King, and just a quick announcement before we start. The Freight Buyers Club will be reporting from Transport Logistic 2025 and Air Cargo Europe in Munich at the start of June. Please ping me if you'd like to meet up for a coffee, a beer, or a chat. Now, as trailed, with us today is Jeffrey Shih, CEO of Dimerco Express Group, which operates right at the intersection of the Asia-Pacific and Asia-US trades. We intend to do our best to break down how freight markets are shifting, what Dimerco's clients are actually doing on the ground, and how you can prepare tactically and strategically for what's coming next. Jeffrey, welcome to the Freight Buyers Club.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Yeah, my name is Jeffrey. I'm the CEO of the Dimerco Express Group. Currently, I'm based in the Los Angeles, California, United States. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Jeffrey. I'm very keen to start by getting your, let's call it as you're in the States, should we go with feet? 30,000 foot view. How are both air and ocean freight markets reacting to this tariff pause on that Asia-US trade, or rather tariff pauses? Because we have two. We have a 90-day pause on non-China countries that commenced in the second week of April. And now, as of the second week of May, we have this US-China tariff pause. Are we seeing a real acceleration now in volume as shippers bring orders forward as fast as they can before the end of this cutoff point?
Yeah, I think let me start from the air freight first. Effective the May 14th, once China and the USA reached a certain consensus, which is the first thing, the dismissal is $800 being removed. And then the add on the 54% of the Barorian duty, or the $100 per package. I think that's one of the impact. Second, from the demands, because early April and the February, they talk about try to remove this minutes $800. Actually, you see the air freight market drop. The global chargeable weight down actually 1% down week over week. Compared with 2 weeks before, it's about 3% down. As far as Asia Pacific to North America, actually about 13% down. But from China, which is 10% down week over week, and 27% down year over year. The reason behind, of course, the e-commerce is one of the big hit. Like I say, because the current situation, the 90 days on hold, air freight actually is dropping in the market.
And most of that's due to that loss of e-commerce due to the end of de minimis exemptions from the US. That's from cargo shipped from Hong Kong and China, isn't it?
That's right. As far as for the ocean, actually in May, there's about 8% of the cancellation. And that's about 58 out of the 692 scheduled flight. The vessel being canceled. For the Trans-Pacific eastbound particularly, there's about 62% of the cancellation. Until they reach May 14th, the new consents, then we will see the continue because two major parts. One is inventory recovering. The other, I think in United States, one of the peak season is they call the back to school holiday. So right now we see in June, the peak season surcharge probably roughly more than $2,000 increase of the peak season surcharge. So that is good for the ocean services.
As you say, we saw those ocean shipping freight rates surge in the first week after the announcement on that Trans-Pacific trade. We've also got new GRIs announced that's general rate increases for anyone who isn't aware what GRIs are. They're due from carriers at the start of June. First, well, I think there's two questions here. Is there enough shipping capacity and boxes available for loading in Asia right now? Or are these rates speculative from carriers? I mean, that's sort of two sides of the same coin, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that, like I said earlier, you have the cancellation and the vessel try to reduce the speed, right? The carbon regulation, all this. Of course, now, like I say, before the end of the summer, the back to school is one of the major volume for the United States market. So we will see the vessel right now, particularly from China to USA, because they have the 90-day allowance until the August 13th. They have to ship, but in terms of the freight capacity, of course, they can ship back to, for example, like intra-Asia, they're now back to the United States. I think this is what the steamship line try to plan for. That's why you see we so-called the peak season surcharge imposed.
Oh, are we seeing a peak season, early peak season though? Because it's not just the back to school market. People are also saying that some shippers are bringing in now for the holiday season later in the year as well, which is what the normal peak season would be.
Yeah, because again, right, for the ocean, it take about from the place the order to make the product to deliver at least 4 to 6 weeks. Some product up to 8 weeks, unless the contract manufacturer or like a AI product, right? Or like a semiconductor, I think they would be faster. But for traditional product, like an ocean product, back to school, the backpack, the stationery, I think those it will take time to recover. But because the 90 days and from the 125% down to 30%, I think that's what people are aiming for that. So our team actually are also visiting United States to work with the customer to make sure we are on top of to meet the customer requirement.
Just on that tariff truce between the US and China, the headline numbers here are that the US is scaling back tariffs on Chinese goods from 145% to 30%. That 30% is 10% plus 20% tariff for fentanyl. China, meanwhile, has dropped duties on US imports from 125% to just 10%. But the tariffs on Chinese imports to the US are a little different to the headline numbers. And just a note for listeners out there, I've done a full visual explaining with multiple guests on this. Please check out episode 42 of the Freight Buyers Club. This points out in a lot more detail than we're going to go into here that these numbers are a little misleading. For many products, the actual duty is higher than 30% due to tariff stacking, up to 90%, but 40, 70% is quite common. Jeffrey, how is Dimerco helping customers understand, calculate, and mitigate exposure, especially those unsure about how new rates could hit them maybe midstream or mid-shipping?
Yeah, I think the Dimerco in USA, we provide we so-called a tariff table and the tariff impact calculator to assist the customer. Because there's a section from China to United States, you have the tariff under the section 301, 232, and also they call the IEEPA, which is International Emergency Economic Program Act, because that's related to fentanyl. That's about 20%.
It's like tariff spaghetti.
Yeah, so that is something people are looking at, right? Because a lot of product might be involved, particularly those e-commerce in the past. The other one, we will provide we so-called a tariff impact calculator. Basically, all the export from major country, we all using the HS code. But HS code might be different between origin and the destination. For instance, export from the Asia could be under the 6 to 8 digit. But now, because those the impact calculator, we need to go for more detail from 8-digit number to 10-digit number. So Dimerco provide those we so-called the tariff impact calculator based on the customer information. Then we will calculate exactly whether it's under 301 involved with a 232 or like a Veneto product in order to help customer to pay the actual cost. Then it may take somewhere between 2 to 4 business days to recalculate. And we also have the in-house brokerage to provide this kind of service to meet the customer, to help customer to work together to avoid the extra duty or tax or tariff.
So, Jeffrey, the China-US truce, if you're shipping from China to the US, what's the real cutoff date for shippers? There's been a lot of misreporting about this. So the 90-day postponement applies, as far as I understand it, to, you're the expert though, to the date cargo clears US customs, not the loading date. So when do people actually need to ship from China to beat that 14th of August expiration?
I think because the announcement already made by the May 14th, so initial 90-day window until the August 13th may change it, depend on the continued negotiation. However, there's the eligible of the 10% duty depend on IT day, because USA the big country, so you have a lot of the IT transfer, right? Then you talk about the entry summary date, or like a first port of the landing into the United States. Recently, we have one case. The shipment arrived on the 8th of the May, and the shipment have to go into the inland for the steamship line, the inland transfer. But because of that, because of the May of the 8th is the first port of entry, they will need to pay for the additional tariff. Then we provide some of the solution under we so-called the bonded warehouse. Then we can transfer, inbound transfer to the bonded warehouse. Then we so-called the inbound export, the IE become after the 14th of the May. Then you can reduce the tariff down to like a 10%. I think that's one of the solutions. But of course, in order to do that before the August 13th, because ocean from China, at least you take 2 to 3 weeks on the transportation. If you talk about inland of the United States, like I mentioned, IE, IT, those you have to meet the requirement. So in order to have the better quality control, for ocean, you need to have like a 2 to 3 weeks. For air freight, probably 3 to 5 days to avoid the arrival of the August 13th. So you better be arrived before that.
Are you expecting an ocean crunch and then closer to that deadline, maybe an air crunch?
Yes.
How are you advising clients? Anything you're doing? What's the number one thing? Is there something tactical? Is it something strategic that the advice that people need, or is it just about understanding when these dates are?
Yeah, I think like as far as those concerned, right now USA government is more concerned about the IEEPA, the Veneto, because that add on 20% of the tariff. In order to do that, I think we need to be cautious on that, right? Like I said earlier, have to base on the export declaration or export HS code to really verify that. The other is the country of origin, also the certificate of the country of origin to ensure the product either made in China or assemblies in other Southeast Asia countries. So I think this is something that's important. Then, of course, talk about those geopolitical risks. The China+1 or China exit been going on in the market since 2018. So when I was in Singapore back to 2016 to 2022, actually out from Singapore, my office, I can see one of the islands called the Batam, which belong to the Indonesia. So at that time, we already moved some of the contract manufacturer from China into Batam because they are the contract manufacturer. So they can do all kind of the manufacture for the customer. Actually, one of the well-known company in United States, which is one of our customer, they are doing the securities camera, which is all made in Indonesia, because Indonesia is one of the major free trade zones. So they can save a lot of the import duty when the product come into the United States. And that back to the 2008, 2019, before pandemic.
Yeah, just for anyone who doesn't know that region, so Batam is directly, it's in Indonesia, but it's right across the strait from obviously one of the biggest ports in the world at Singapore. So Jeffrey, have you seen any change from some of your customers in terms of that China+1? Are people looking at Southeast Asia or India, or is there just too many unknowns at the moment for people to make decisions on this?
Yes, because China, you know, in the last 20, 30 years, they already built the infrastructure of the manufacture. However, I like to always add on the Taiwanese company, which is the electronic semiconductor. Those the contract manufacturer, the top 10, I think at least 5 to 6 companies, including the number one Foxconn, right? And some of the companies like Inventec, Quanta, and like a Wistron, Pegatron. They are all doing not only for the Apple, but also for other like a Dell computer, HP computer. So they already ship from China into Southeast Asia country, including typically like Vietnam and Thailand for the computer industry, right? And Pegatron, they're also in the Vietnam. They're also doing some of the, like I mentioned earlier, other than Vietnam, they also set up in the Batam. That back to 2018 is one of the largest investment at that time. Now you see more companies shipping from China into Southeast Asia, but it all depends on whether it's a Taiwanese company or Chinese company, right? If you look at the USA market, consumer product could be electronic consumer, right? Could be the regular general product. I think general product probably will stay in the Southeast Asia, such as Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, or even India market. But electronic, I think that, like I mentioned, other than that, Thailand, Malaysia, and Vietnam, a little bit in India right now. And you see the Apple now have the big investment, 500 billion in India market.
You said before we started this interview, I know you've been expanding your advisory capabilities. This now extends to helping people moving into places like India and Southeast Asia, including factory relocation. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, actually, like I said, back to the 2016 to 2022, when I was in Singapore, managing our Southeast Asia activity. At that time, we already have the company moving from China to Vietnam, China to Malaysia.
How do you move a factory?
Oh, one thing you can move by the truck. I think a lot of people may not know for example, from southern China to Vietnam, you can using the cross-border road freight, and that can all the way down to Singapore. For example, we have of course, you will combine the ocean as well. We have a couple of cases. One is in the Malaysia, Johor Bahru. There's one company that set up like a 48-week transition for the factory location. We took about 36 weeks, and we moved more than 40 of the 40-foot low bed, and also the 91 open truck within the 36 weeks, including those custom compliance, customs clearance. Because particularly in Malaysia, all the customer only rely on 3 to 5 major custom broker to do the job for them. So Dimerco is one of them.
And how does the customs brokerage how does that help your clients? Does it help them move goods faster? Does it help them have a more resilient or stable supply chain?
I think one thing that because the complexity of the custom from the origin country and the destination country. The other is the safety transportation, how you navigate and managing the safety of the factory relocation. Like I say, Southeast Asia, Dimerco have the well experience over 40 years compared with some of the international freight forwarder. Because our office already set up since 1976 already, from Malaysia and Philippines to Singapore. Singapore was established 1980. So with the experience, with the well-known of the people over there, actually we have over 600 employees over there for over 40 years experience in the marketplace. So I have the opportunity to manage in that team, and I learn a lot, because the different culture, different behavior, right? Different mentality, and same thing for the customer. You have to deal with that. So that's the complexity of how we help to the customer.
That 48-week relocation, yeah, quite amazing. I was just thinking, I think it was about 10 years ago that the Southeast Asia ASEAN, I think it was 2015. I might be wrong. Please forgive me if I'm wrong. Signed an FTA, free trade agreement with China. So some of these things are quite easy to do in Asia, and those cross-border barriers to trade between Southeast Asia and Asia have allowed China+1 to thrive, actually. I was making me think that when you were saying you moved the factory across on trucks, if you tried to reshore from Mexico, for example, wouldn't all the parts of the factory now be subject to like steel and aluminium tariffs and things like that? They would be, wouldn't they? I don't know. It's just a flight of fancy of mine.
Because the reshoring, we also see some of the factory move from China into Mexico. Actually, I've been to Mexico since over 30 years ago. If you look at the Guadalajara, for example, all the contract manufacturer, the big name over there, right? Flextronic, JBL, those American companies. But if you look at the 20 to 25 years ago, the Taiwanese contract manufacturer, Foxconn in Chihuahua, and some of the contract manufacturer, Wistron, Pegatron, they are in the Juarez, which is the other side of the El Paso. Some of the manufacturers used to be in San Diego, cross the border called Otay Mesa. Those are over 20 years ago. But today, if you look at the administration, they require the contract manufacturer move back to United States. That's why earlier I mentioned that the top 10 contract manufacturers, including 5 or 6 Taiwanese companies, actually they're already in Mexico or even border. Now they try to convert the production into United States, but because they used to have we so-called after services. So like a Quanta, Eventec, Pegatron, Foxconn, now they all ship some of the production back to the United States. Because the AI product, because semiconductor, right? Because those the requirements. So I think the Taiwanese manufacturers, they are ready to do that, and they are committed to do that.
There's been some big investments by Taiwanese companies that helped. The CHIPS Act was pushing that as well. I just don't know why. I just imagine some executive in Mexico from a big Asian company or a big Mexican company or a big US company going, I'd like to reshore to the States, but my factory is going to get tariffed for every single part to enter the US. So we might have to stay in Mexico. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. I'm going to explore that on future episodes. Sticking with Latin America, Jeffrey, you mentioned before we started that you recently went on a trip to Brazil. What logistics patterns or opportunities are emerging there or across South America? Does that fit in to the broader diversification efforts we've been talking about here from your clients?
Yeah, if you look at the global trade, actually, before I returned 2022, people talk about RCEP, right? Regional Comprehensive Economic Program, which are under the 15 countries, including ASEAN 10 countries, including China, India, then New Zealand, Australia, Japan, and South Korea. Then the last 2 to 3 years, people refresh again the BRIC. Now they add on South Africa. So if you look at the India, China, and Brazil, because Brazil is still, in terms of the population, they are one of the largest one in the Latin American country. So in late April, I went down to visit some of the customer and our agent partner down there, which they are doing the warehousing distribution as well as doing the development into Central and Latin America. And as you know, the last 2 months, when Trump have the new announcement, then some of the agriculture product actually import from Brazil into China. But because they are under the BRICS agreement, Chinese company also ship some of the product into Central America, including the Brazil. And one of the major port in Peru also helped the development by the Chinese company. And they are already established and completed last year in the port of the Peru. A lot of the automation. So actually, usually I like to share the Chinese, the One Belt, One Road, actually they already go outside of the United States. Then try to have the well development. Then become like they don't want to against the United States, but at least they diversify their business opportunity. That's why China import to USA only very minimum of the impact to China export, maybe only 40% only. But USA import is probably over 40% of the product coming from China.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I was just checking then while you were explaining that. So the China ASEAN FTA, there's been about 5 versions. One of them was updated in 2015, so I was sort of right. But they go back another 10 years, the first version. So different elements of it entered force. Maybe the 2015 version was when they opened up road transport. The Australia-China FTA did start in 2015. Jeffrey, if we might, let's rewind a little. You've been at Dimerco for over 30 years now. Can you explain to everyone how you got into this industry and what has been the attraction or the challenge that has kept you here?
I studied in the international trade when I was young in the college. Actually, I'm looking for the job I can go abroad to learn. That's why I joined company 88. Then 1991, I have the opportunity to transfer to San Francisco. So I stayed in San Francisco for 12 years. Then I moved down to Los Angeles. Then 2015, I went to New York for a couple of months. And 2016, I transferred to Southeast Asia country, the regional office in Singapore. So because our industry as an international freight forwarding, transportation, logistic company, you got to have the experience in the different country. Like I said earlier, different country have a different regulation, custom, behavior, regulation. I think this is something I learned. And even though during the pandemic, I didn't come back home for over 500 days. A lot of people were surprised. But the business, right? The family, how you balance that. I think that then I try to learn one thing, separate the stress and the pressure. Because we all have the pressure when we work in a company. But don't let the pressure become your stress. Then I think that most of people can overcome that.
How would you describe your approach to leadership? And has the type of leadership that people respond to, has that changed over the years? Or maybe it's changing now. How do you view it?
I learned something from my founder back to the early 1991 before I transferred to the United States. I think one thing is very important. Always think about how you create the value to your department, to your station, to your company, to your region, right? So they always keep it in my mind, become my motto, personal motto, because how to create the value. So today, if I look back 30 years ago until now, everywhere I transfer, I try to think about how I'm going to contribute and develop the value or contribute my value to the company. That's why today I have the opportunity to take this opportunity and hopefully can help company to move forward because we are 54 years already. Hopefully we can move forward like a Japanese company or the European company because the freight forwarder could be last for long. So that's something I like to share myself. Yeah.
Do you feel that freight forwarding is still about the human element, or is technology taking more of a role here? How do those two things balance out in your view?
I think 2 parts. Technology is very important. Like at Dimerco, we have owned our Value Plus, which we've been developed over 3 decades. From the DOS version to Windows version to the web version. Now we also look into the AI capability. Internally, we have the streamlined operation process, the RPA, robotic process. Then also we have the connectivity, API, EDI with the customer for the connectivity. But the most important freight forwarder, I think the people is important because the troubleshooting in our industry, it happens everywhere, every day. Right? So sometimes the AI is still not able to cover that. But in terms of the synergy to win in our industry, I think you must have the advanced technology plus the well-trained of the employee in order to meet the customer requirement.
Where do you think technology in our industry is most advanced? By region, by mode? Is there more that could be done to use technology to reduce costs and friction, take costs and friction out of supply chains or out of businesses that depend on supply chains?
Yeah, in terms of the supply chain and logistics, if I look at the supply chain, it's an end-to-end solution, which is including the pickup, right? Including the all mode, trucking, custom brokerage, export by air, by ocean, then also the transportation down to the destination by air freight, the ocean freight, warehouse, and the last mile delivery. But for the freight forwarding company, I think the Dimerco add on additional service we call the multi-mode transportation. Like I mentioned, we have the cross-border train freight from China to Europe. So how are you going to manage it, their supply chain, including those material flow and the visibility. We also handle the cross-border road freight from China into Singapore. And during the pandemic, because the space constraint, we also handle the multi-mode transportation, including air transportation from Southeast Asia countries through Singapore to United States to Europe. We also handle the CL transportation during the Red Sea crisis. So I think the system beside the air freight, ocean freight, contract logistics, basically the custom brokerage is one part of it. The other, the multi-mode transportation, I think that's other than those transportation mode I mentioned, the multi-mode is also very, very important to meet the customer requirement.
The rest of 2025, what are your expectations and how are you helping clients plan for them? Are you expecting more disruption? Maybe, I don't know, I'm going to be an optimist, maybe more stability. I mean, we've got so many unknowns out there, haven't we?
Yeah, I think number one, the manufacturer shipping from China to Southeast Asia country, I think it will maintain. The other, like a Taiwanese contract manufacturer shipping from China to Southeast Asia, or even from Southeast Asia, Taiwan into United States, which I mentioned earlier. I think those will continue because the tariff requirement by the Trump government. Second, I think we so-called the trade compliance and the sustainability for the company, I think those are the important, right? Like at Dimerco, we have some agreement with the carrier to provide the SAP. We also have the system to identify internal with the airline as well as the ocean carrier. I think those for the sustainability, those are the important. The other, I think, like I mentioned earlier, trade compliance, how the trade tariff, the control and the compliance. Like I mentioned earlier, we have the tariff impact calculator. Once the customer provides the information, we can help them to identify what exactly they need to pay. The other, we must be able to identify the COO, the country of the origin, because those are the important to reflect the actual duty. And we also can provide those with so-called duty drawback, because you probably can import into United States, then re-export, then to get the duty drawback. The last one, I think is important, boundary warehouse or the free trade zone warehouse operation, which is now in USA is very popular because the 90-day the tariff or future tariff issue, those boundary warehouse, I think will be helpful to reduce the tariff. So I think those major things will continue. We will see in the second half of the 2025.
We've sort of touched on this, but as a final question, I know Dimerco has long played in terms of trade across the Asia Pacific region and on that, particularly on that Asia-US lane. As that manufacturing base starts to decentralize, what role do you see for your company playing in that transition, especially when we talk about what we mentioned earlier, nearshoring or long-term reshoring to the US?
Dimercos have a long history in Asia Pacific since 1971. Although USA, we have the over 45 years experience. That's why one thing, when I transferred back to United States, we got to build a branding, right? But 80% of the Dimerco network people are all located in the Asia Pacific. That's why the slogan, connecting Asia with the world, is a new slogan in the last 3 years. We try to position ourselves to be competitive in the marketplace, not aiming for the biggest one, but must be the most competitive international freight forwarder and supply chain consultancy. I think this is the mission the founder gave to me. So I must carry continuously, connecting Asia with world to leverage our Asia network, the carrier relationship, to continue to pursue in the marketplace. And USA, of course, we want to continue grow because it's the number 1 or number 2 market in the global market.
The message, well, loud and clear for freight buyers. If you're trying to make smart decisions under this tariff shadow, move deliberately, diversify smartly, and maybe most of all, don't wait too long. This has been the Freight Buyers Club Insight podcast, sponsored by Ontigos Cloud. Jeffrey Shih, CEO of Dimerco Express Group, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thank you for the opportunity for this interview and share some of my personal viewpoint to this podcast. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Big thanks to Karen Ball and Tom Matthews for all their hard work on this episode, Ontigos Cloud for supporting independent journalism, and you all for listening. We'll be reporting, as I mentioned earlier, from Transport Logistics 2025 and Air Cargo Europe in Munich at the start of June. Please ping me if you'd like to meet up. And do subscribe and follow the Freight Buyers Club wherever you get your content to keep up to date on the latest from the worlds of shipping, supply chain, and air freight. We'll be back soon.